So, hi, my name is Hunter. I read books, even though I have started and not finished 2 books already. I'm about to start another one because I have another fan. Shocker, shocker. This one we're gonna call Disney Princess. They're okay with that title, and it was the first thing I thought of. Yeah. So, the plan is I'm gonna read until my brother wakes up, because my plan is I'm gonna try to go get a tattoo today, because I wanted to get one for a while, and since I turned 18, because to me it was important to wait until I was 18. Yeah, so we're gonna get a tattoo. I'm either gonna get a little bull shark with a little like spiky collar, a dragon, or I don't know. I have like a few little ideas in my phone already. I might flip through like the book at the place and see if any of them tickle my fancy. But I'm waiting for my brother to wake up so I don't have to go by myself, because my stepdad has to go to work. And then also, when I get to like go hang out with my dad later today, odds are I'll have to wait for I'll have a therapy appointment, and then it's gonna be like, ugh, it's so late, it's interfering with my partying. So also I don't trust them to drive after 8 o'clock. I don't like driving at 8 o'clock. It doesn't sound fun. So yeah, I'm kind of just going to be reading until I hear my brother shuffle around. We'll see how far we get. Also, this book, you may have seen it floating around TikTok, like a few months ago. It's called Playground. It's by Aron B. Okay. So, that. So that is a slide full of blood. There are guts at the bottom, razor blades, a bloodied shoe, a cut off leg, more guts. And on the cover, there is a quote: "A genuinely chilling, uncomfortable novel that will make even the most jaded horror fan squirm." Brian Keene. So I've already read a good bit of this book, but I want to start from the beginning because I feel like this is a book that like a lot of people have like wanted to read. But if you're like me, you don't want to buy a book just because everyone's talking about like, oh my god, it's so gross. Like, that's not a reason to buy a book. That's why I'm borrowing it from someone else. And there's a chance I might buy it so I can then inflict it on other people. But yeah. So before I read the synopsis, there's going to be a brief trigger warning, because as far as I had gotten, these are things, I don't remember what page I was on, but this is some of the bad stuff in it. So there is daughter on mother incest, where the daughter is very much the pursuer and aggressive. There is necrophilia, again, with the mother-daughter, the daughter-mother incest. There is adopted mother on adopted son incest, and it gets very into detail of how they are fornicating. Obviously, there's going to be child death and child torture and some psychological shit going on. There is shit eating. Now, the first time I read that part, I skipped over it. I'm gonna have to actually like read it. So enjoy that. And then I don't know if there are any other trigger warnings, other than just like the overall like, hey, some fucked up stuff is about to happen. So if any of that is comfortable, skip this one. So here's the synopsis. Once in a lifetime, 3 low-income families have been given a handsome retainer to join Geraldine Border for a day at her cliffside estate. All the parents must do to collect the rest of their money is to allow their children to test out the revolutionary playground equipment Geraldine has been working on for decades. But there's a reason the structures in the bowels of her... Why does it say bowels? In the bowels of her Gothic castle have taken so long to develop. They were never meant to see the light of day. When a band of dysfunctional children is suddenly thrust into a diabolical realm of violence, they must grow up instantly and have a chance at survival. Will they find a way to put their differences aside or be swallowed up by the insidious architecture all around them? So when I had read, I just read the fucked upness that is this woman, Geraldine. I never actually got to like the playground. So it takes a little bit to get to the playground, but don't you worry, it's fucked up. And with that, I think we're gonna begin. Why is the dedication to youthful spirits that have never grown old? Who have now grown old and cracked, but still remember carefree days. That is not this book. All right. Playground. A leather leash extended from Caroline Clark's hand to her little boy. Her narrowed eyes rested on her son, Donnie, who sat a short distance in front of her, sluggishly swaying on a swing. His smooth, pale face was flat, absent of any discernible emotion. Caroline cupped her free hand, protecting her cigarette from the raindrops. The warmth rising to her fingers was welcome in the uncharacteristically chilly evening. She snuck a quick but deep drag and did her best to keep the tobacco dry. Rock Stanley watched them from the entrance of the park. The thick wrinkles stretching over his gigantic head added a puzzled glare to his grizzled appearance. The droplets fell at a rate that would have sent any sensible parent heading for their car. Yet there was her tiny boy. Caroline remained. In a way, Rock felt a measure of relief at the sight. While he was looking for a parent with at least 2 children, securing another participant would be better than none. He was glad he decided to check the playgrounds on such a dreary afternoon. Surprisingly, the improbable gamble had the potential to pay off. And then we got a little picture. I'm probably not going to show all the pictures. I feel like they're going to get fucked up. Rock clenched a brochure in his big hand that read, "Helping Hearts." Helping, sure. It displayed various information about the charity that helped underprivileged children gain access to modern playground equipment. It also had an area with cut lines that surrounded a single ticket for family entry, embedded on the final page. Not wanting it to get soaked, he slipped the informational material back into his pocket. He'd always hated approaching people. His towering height and bulky frame always seemed to intimidate them. Additionally, his social inaptitude was a hurdle. Rock had a lack of experience that no amount of practice could make up for. Despite his many faults, the motivation that awaited him back home could turn him into a miracle maker at times. Hopefully he could come through again as he had before, but there was something else that was still on his mind besides securing a reservation. He's not a fucking dog, Rock thought. Rock squinted his eyes the more he focused on the toddler tethered attached to the child's back, the more it bothered him. In his mind, it was a physical manifestation of restriction itself. Just the sight of such a domineering tool filled him with ire. As the rain pattered down on Rock's faded, flat cap, he clenched his teeth. The boy looked just old enough to attend school. He didn't require the weight of such an oppressive invention dragging him down, siphoning the urge to explore and roam freely from his soul. Rock expected such a crass contraption might mutate the child's spirit into something more predictive and robotic. He knew it all too well. As Rock watched the boy sit on the swing, he already appeared halfway there. Most children in his position would be rocking back and forth, testing the limits and heights they could push themselves to, exploring acceleration with the youthful vigor to borderline dangerous speeds. Donnie looked dead. It was as if his mother was pushing a tiny corpse along for a ride in the downpour. It sickened Rock. He didn't know if he could watch it anymore, but just as he considered taking a step toward them, Donnie's pace changed. Caroline took one last mighty pull of her parliament before she gave Donnie a hard push to the spine. The force sent him upward and left him rocking. "You've got to do some of the work too," Caroline scolded. "I can't do everything for you. Kick your feet forward." Doing as he was told, the young Donnie picked up speed. Caroline stepped to the side, ensuring he could rock backward to gain momentum. She continued to push him, and with each completed motion, the leash stretched further and further. Rock watched with discomfort and anger infecting his chest. The scene was difficult to take in. Then suddenly, when Donnie reached the pinnacle of his forward motion, Caroline violently tugged the leash backwards. The power of the purposely ill-timed jerk caused the unsuspecting boy to flip backwards. The yank was just strong enough to turn his body half a revolution. After the 4-foot drop, Donnie landed headfirst in the muddy sand. The sickening thud of his body hitting the gunky beach grains was highly unsettling. Rock could hear it from where he was stood. He cringed. His eyes flared. It was all too familiar. "Get up," Caroline screamed. "You have to hold on. Didn't I tell you to fucking hold on?" As the dizzy boy rolled off his back and sat up, Rock saw the mass of wet sand that matted his hair and clung to his face. It was beginning to make sense why she took a child to the playground in the pouring rain. A flurry of vicious imagery invaded Rock's head. He'd never felt such a strong urge to hurt someone. Inflicting violence wasn't a deed that typically crossed his mind, but he had no control over the psychological jolts. The terrible things he might do under the right set of circumstances seemed unending. But as attractive as the horrible ideas were, Rock understood they weren't possible. That dreary day wasn't about him. No day was. Life and the dynamic between Rock and the pair of strangers he studied were far more complex than any idea so simple. "Clean yourself off, now," Caroline yelled. She slapped the back of Donnie's head. The force behind the strike was so hard that sand flew from the boy's hair. Rock looked away. He couldn't watch it any longer. He focused on interrupting it. Walking toward the swing, he extracted the brochure from his pocket. "Once in a lifetime." "So he just handed it to you?" Tom grimly asked. He took his eyes off the road to gaze at his wife, Molly, was smiling. "I couldn't believe it," Molly replied. "Well, Macomber has gone to total crap over the last few years. I had to fish out broken glass from the sand the last time I took the kids. I didn't even want to bring them again, but they love that place. The swings are all busted up too. I think there's a couple of junkies living behind the bleachers back in the woods. Maybe that's why he was there, throwing a bone to families who have to use that sad excuse for a playground. That's what it seemed like anyway." "Yeah, maybe. Who cares why? I mean, this place looks amazing, and $3,000 just to have our kids test out the ultra-modern playground for a few hours? It'd be a treat for the kids, too. It's a no-brainer. I swear, when he explained it, I felt like Charlie finding the golden ticket." This is a fucked up version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This is like Freddy Fazbear meets Charlie and the Chocolate. Like it is like it's fucked up. Pushing her black hair aside, Molly looked down at the ticket embedded in the vibrant brochure, unable to contain her excitement. The places highlighted in the various snaps on the pamphlet were nothing short of exhilarating. Tall, twisting slides, sturdy swings, clean sandbox, cushy seesaw, multicolored merry-go-round, balloon house with a ball pit, and a massive stretch of monkey bars were just a few of the alluring sights. The area surrounding the pamphlet's adolescent toys was filled with what looked like the softest sand and was encircled by the greenest grass. It was a space of pure magnificence, a visual that would cause the heart of any child to thrash. Molly wasn't even going to be the one playing, but she could barely contain herself. Her eagerness was mostly unselfish. She wanted the best for her children. But at the same time, the money felt like gravy being laid on so thick it could drown them. The Grimleys would be happy to drown in it. When their bank balances were less than desirable, the payout wasn't the only reason Molly wanted the trip. Showing her little housebonds a good time was always a top priority. Finding ways to have fun despite the fiscal fiasco was a challenge she welcomed. The Grimleys were never rich, but were able to live with relative comfort for the last several years. However, their content mediocrity suddenly vanished several months ago when Tom lost his job at Electric Boat. The firing was outside of Tom's control. Company cutbacks came because of an executive-level fixed pricing scandal. The AB stock tanked. Even now, the company's survival wasn't guaranteed, especially given the public outrage. The company quickly cleaned house at a leadership level, but the reverberations of the scandal were felt by the little guys too. Tom still wondered if it was best that he'd been forced to move on. Either way, as a result, his equus money was tighter than ever. "It's just..." Tom began. "What?" Molly asked. "It just sounds too good to be true." "It is." "I'd say the same if that $1,000 retainer wasn't sitting in our bank account right now, but you saw the balance. I damn well know you saw it." "But isn't that kind of weird too? I mean, just give someone $1,000 at a playground. Come on, sweetie. You know as well as I do we have shit luck." Yeah, but just because you win the lottery doesn't mean you'll win every time you play. It's still hard to believe. Well, hopefully it sinks in when we're another $2,000 towards the black and the kids are having the time of their lives. Tom furrowed his brow in a deep thought. It wasn't the first time he discussed it with Molly. Yeah, he said. I guess you're right. Thank God, I was starting to think you didn't want to go anymore. Don't worry, everything you said makes sense. I know I tend to overthink stuff a little sometimes. A little? Molly rolled her eyes jokingly and returned to the pamphlet. Tom found a smile again. He understood he was a pain at times, but he thought it brought a balance between them. Molly was far more daring and spontaneous as opposed to his tightly measured approach. Oh, look, Molly said. There's more. I didn't even see this part. She touched her slender finger to the text of the back page and keyed in and the writing positioned under the header. Our goal. Geraldine Borden aims to implement one state-of-the-art playground in 1995 somewhere in the New England region. Will be selected and the grand play space will be presented as a surprise to the chosen representee's city and the lucky children who reside within it. Molly shrieked with delight. That's why they didn't want us to talk about it. This is some kind of super exclusive thing. Oh my God, imagine if we got selected. They built it next year, right in Pawtucket. We'd be set. Relax. You always do this, Tom replied, a melancholic tinge weighing down his vernacular. Do what? No matter what the odds are, you always think the best things are going to happen to you. Well, you happened to me, didn't you? Tom remained silent. Didn't you? She persisted. She tickled aside and gave him a lovable smile. Molly felt Tom twitch and squinted her eyes. She leaned into his stubbly cheek and planted a proper peck on his face. Tom let out a chuckle. You always were a charmer. And you're as sweet as strawberry shortcake. The sign for exit 13 appeared, and Tom flicked his turn signal on cue. His hand fell into Molly's tan thigh, and he squeezed it twice. We're almost at your sister's, Molly teetered excitedly, placing her hand over Tom's. The kids are going to be so surprised when we get there. Molly stared gleefully out the passenger window, looking at the beautiful sunny sky. Tom glanced at the brochure in her hand, back to racking his brain. Geraldine Border, he asked. Where have I heard that name before? Well, she's obviously a state philanthropist of some sort. I'm not surprised if you've heard of her. Thought you said it was a guy that talked to you in the park, though, didn't you? Yeah, he was a big fella. Thought he might be in trouble at first, but once he started talking, I realized he was just a gentle giant. He said he was a representative for the charity. He was really timid, especially for a man his size. But I'm glad he finally mustered up the courage to give me this. It might very well change our lives. Tom rolled his eyes and huffed as if to say, There you go again. Molly acknowledged his comical mannerism with a grin of her own. What? Molly asked. At least for a day, anyway. The false idol. Oh, this guy's an asshole. Greg Matthews pulled the Dodge Caravan into the black tar driveway, slowing it to a halt beside a massive maple tree. He looked over to the passenger seat at his son, Kip. Greg reached behind him and lifted a red clay-colored baseball glove forward. He smacked it into Kip's belly. The mitt looked pristine and shined, like a piece of equipment you might see in the Little League's World Series. She's already oiled up for you, Greg said, but it's up to you to break her in. You could start today. There was a look on Kip's face, like if he could have used his mouth to make a motorboat noise, he would have. Instead, he thanked his dad with little enthusiasm. Greg was reading his body language loud and clear. What the hell is it with you? Greg asked his son. Not only am I getting you top-of-the-line equipment, but I spent all my free time training you, and that's all you have to say? What? I said thank you. You said it like I took a shit in your cereal. Kip tried to suppress a giggle. He never heard his dad use that one before. Greg smacked his hand against the dashboard. The loud slam caught Kip off guard. His arms immediately rattled. I'm not fucking around, Kip. I'd have figured out by now you'd realize it's a serious business. Do you want to go pro or dilly-dally around here fighting for peanuts the rest of your life? I want to go pro. Kip spoke the words like he was reciting a religious verse that had been beaten into his brain. He was conditioned to conform, to win. Well, why don't you fucking act like it then? Greg asked, lifting the brown bottle of Budweiser up from the cup holder. He took a huge swig, polished the contents off, and threw the empty bottle to the backseat with the others. The hollow container clanged as glass struck glass. He had blown through several over the course of their drive. You know, Greg said, when I was your age, I'd have been given my left nut to have a father that gave a shit about what I was doing. When I finished high school, I had offers available from some of the top farm teams in the country, and scholarships offered for college football and basketball. I was a goddamn prodigy, a fucking 3-sport athlete. Kip hated how his father screamed when he had too much to drink. It was uncomfortable and frightening all the same. Greg went on. You think that cocksucker ever said boo to me? You think he ever gave me any pointers along the way? If you did, you'd be wrong. If it wasn't for my knee going out at Boston College, it wouldn't have mattered. He wouldn't have had a choice. My face would have been all over the TV. The passionate speech was one Kip's father had gotten out a lot of practice in. He recited it like a normal person might the lyrics of their favorite song. It was an obsession. Kip had never met his grandpa. He died before he was born, but the way his dad talked, he imagined to be a real son of a bitch. So, you should be grateful I'm on the sidelines for you, Greg said. I could be out with my buddies having a beer. I could be doing so many things that I actually enjoy. But instead I'm grinding it out with you, teaching you the traits that are going to make you a millionaire one day. But you won't leave your dad out of the dark once you make it, will you, kid? Greg slapped Kip on the shoulder, trying to liven the boy up a little. Of course not, Dad. That a boy. The proof is in the pudding. You just look at your brother CJ. You listen to me. And you'll be just like him in no time. Kip didn't respond, but looked into his dad's glazed-over eyes and smiled with a nod. The grin was so theatrical it could have reeled in an Oscar. All right, kid. Let's get at it, then. Greg hopped out of the van and slid the back door open, reaching inside and retrieving the black and green metal Easton baseball bat. It had its share of scuffs, compliments of the two muddled baseballs he lifted with it. What sounded like a knife grinding against stone wheel suddenly invaded Greg's ears. The beer flowing through his system made him slow to react, but just as Kip exited the car, he looked to the street curb. Greg's oldest son, Bobby, entered his line of vision. A massive Chinese-style dragon was imprinted atop his yellow skateboard. He was sliding sideways in a 50-50 grind position. The momentum he'd gathered prior to his ollie was enough that it impressively brought him down the remainder of the street curb. Bobby hooked his heavy frame off his board as he reached the driveway and kicked down hard against the back of the skateboard. The wood jumped up at him, and he grabbed hold of the front axle like it was a second nature. Greg didn't seem to find Bobby's feat impressive. The snotty, unimpressed look on his face crinkled into a glare that was more anger than anything. Bobby had seen the look before. It seemed these days was the only one he saw from his old man anymore. Bobby wasn't usually so soft and welcoming with others, but for his father, he'd do whatever he could to stay on his good side. Good morning, Dad, Bobby said. He forced himself to smile, but nervousness warped his grin. Greg narrowed his eyes at him. Is it? It's pretty nice out, I guess. Good day for baseball. I don't know about that shit, though, Greg said, bobbing his head toward the board in his son's hand. Yeah? Greg stepped beside Kip, who quietly watched on. You see, Kip, Greg said, if you get fixated on something like this X Games horseshit your brother's always bobbling about, you'll end up broke. They're making it into a sport next year, Dad, like a legit competition. I don't give a damn what you say. Ain't no bicycle, skateboard, or roller skates, no matter where you use them, they'll ever pay the bills. That's a fact. Ain't no one gonna tell me otherwise. If you got something to say about it, just don't. You know how Nike says just do it? Well, for you, it's just don't. Because I don't want to hear it, understood? Bobby's face turned a deeper shade of red, traveling outside the normal range that a bigger kid manifested when he was skateboarding. Are you fat and fucking stupid? Greg asked his eldest. I said, understood. Bobby nodded his flaming face, and his eyes laid the personal pain of being a disappointment. Well, his father said, you'll have to excuse us. Your brother and I have real stuff to work on now. I don't know how old this kid's supposed to be. I'm assuming, if he's you're a disappointment, I'm assuming he's a teenager, about to grow up teenager. But I think he can't be more than 12, because he also comes to the playground. Me is a little confused. It'll wet my whistle. Greg approached the gate leading to the backyard. Kip remained in place looking at his big brother and mouthed the words, "Don't listen to him." As the gate came open, Greg passed his fingers to his bottom lip. His loud, obnoxious whistle rippled the air. "Let's go," Greg ordered. His name's Greg. That's his first problem. In the eye contact exchange between Kip and Bobby, there was an ounce of bad blood. They were each at the mercy of the same grouchy guardian. Kip didn't know why his dad was the way he was, and neither did Bobby. They'd both just been dealt a shit hand. But they weren't the only ones. Tanya sat the paper down on the countertop and pushed it towards her mother, her eyes like those of the puppy dog that had just gotten into the trash. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she was anxious. Tanya had been dreading the conversation they were on the cusp of having for days. The document in front of her didn't just hold ink on the page. It held her heart, too. $60? Are you crazy? Lacey asked, a snarl of repugnance plastered across her face. Do you think we're rich or something? It was the only one I could find, Tanya begged. I checked the phone book and all the papers. I even wrote them and told them about our situation. The price is normally $100, and they said for us, $100? Lacey's pretty blonde head quickly tensed up as if it might launch like a rocket right off her shoulders at any moment. The agony engraved on Tanya's face was out of a horror movie. Her mother's heated reaction was the equivalent of pulling her tiny heart out and stabbing it on the table 1,000 times over. Tanya's thin bottom lip crumbled inward like a 3-leaf clover. 4 leaves wouldn't have been suitable for a child of such unfortunate ilk. But I love swimming, Mom. I know I can make you and even Dad proud. I just need a chance, please. Lacey chewed on the idea. I know when the YMCA closed, it broke your heart, but maybe it'll open back up again. Eventually, the membership of the Y was affordable. But this kind of advanced class, it's just too much. Do you have any idea how much hamburger helper that would buy? Tanya begged her with her eyes this time, the sadness and frustration creating a dark window. Please, Mom, she whispered. I'm sorry. I just don't think it's worth it. A big tear fell over Tanya's eyelashes and down her face. Come on, Lacey said. Don't cry, honey. I didn't get to do everything I wanted at your age either. You know that, right? Tanya looked down at the table. Lacey pushed the paper back to her daughter. Listen, in a few years you'll forget about all this anyway. You'll be busy thinking about boys and finding yourself a looker like I did with your daddy. Maybe once a couple more years pass, we can afford a cheerleading outfit for you. If not, you can always use my old ones. I hate cheerleading, Tanya cried. But you've never tried it. I know what it is. I want to swim. Tanya folded her arms. Now don't get snippy with me, her mother said. I'm sorry, I just really, really, really want to do this. When have I ever asked you or Dad for anything? Tanya once asked why Kip and CJ got to do what they wanted, while she couldn't, but knew that wouldn't be fair. The driving force between the extreme baseball fandom and this house wasn't her brother's. That was all Dad. Cheer's a lot more common for girls than swim, Lacey said. Mom. Tanya's growl wasn't going to be enough to convince her. Mother. She wiped the tear from her cheek and did what she did best. Analyzed the situation. As a straight-A student, she was sharp enough to realize her approach was off-kilter. Grown beyond her years, Tanya forced herself to turn off the emotional aspects of all she strove to attain. She took a deep breath and reassessed the scenario, then readied her refined tactics. It was obvious she was asking for the wrong person. Okay, Tanya said. I respect your opinion. But will you please ask Dad, too? I just want him to know how much it means to me, even if we can't afford it. Tanya knew her dad's personality all too well. She knew he'd see swim as a competitive sport and cheerleading as nothing more than a sideline attraction. While there was cheerleading competitions, it still most definitely was not a sport. As far as Tanya was concerned, it was just a way for pretty girls to showboat. Not true. I think cheerleaders, they do their work. It's not for everyone, but they work hard. Let's be real. They can do things that a lot of other people cannot do, and that should be respected. But with this particular family, I understand why they're like, women. Lacey looked at her daughter and couldn't help but smile. While she didn't enjoy how Tanya continued to push back, she was impressed with how elegantly she phrased her question. Tanya displayed a methodical grace and kind-hearted intelligence that had failed to find either of her parents. It was like all the decent genetics had skipped a generation on both sides. Okay, honey, Lacey said. I'll bring it up to your father. Just don't get your hopes up, though. Thank you. Oh, and I was going to surprise you, but I may as well give it to you now. Tanya reached under the table and pulled a small box from her pocket and set the square zebra-patterned box on the table in front of Lacey. The hot pink lettering on the box read, Fantasia Accessories. What's this? It was supposed to be a thank you gift for letting me join the swim team. Lacey pulled the box toward her and grabbed the top. But even if I don't get to join the team, I still want you to have it, Tanya explained. Tanya figured things might work out in her favor. She got the gift in advance to butter her mom up as best she could. When the top came off the box, Lacey's eyes widened. Oh my God, I love it. While Lacey was genuinely enthralled, some confusion arrived seconds after her initial declaration. What is it exactly? The round bracelet with the zebra pattern overlapped inside itself a few times over. Lacey plucked the gift out of the box and raised it in front of her face. It's a slap bracelet, Tanya said. Come on, Mom. They're everywhere. She snatched the bracelet out of her mother's hand and straightened it out in the bracelet. Just flatten them out like this before you use them. Wait a second. Slap bracelet? Aren't those the things that got recalled for cutting people? Tanya drove the bracelet down over her mother's wrist and watched it wrap around it. The zebra and hot pink design fit her like a glove. You're fine, aren't you? Tanya asked. Lacey's eyes widened again. Are you crazy? Mom, it's fine. That story's just an urban legend. Don't you think if they actually hurt someone, they wouldn't be for sale anymore? It wasn't the first time Lacey felt out of her league exchanging dialogue with her daughter. What she said made sense. Plus, the sound and feel of the snapping bracelet circling her wrist like a gentle snake was so satisfying she couldn't help but remove the bracelet and straighten it out again. But as she did so, Lacey also got a look at her watch. Shoot, we need to get going, otherwise we're going to be late. Slap. Lacey swiftly banged the bracelet against her wrist again and let it curl around her. I need you to go upstairs and get your brothers. Tell them to come down right away. Okay, but you promised, right? Promise what now? You promise you'll ask Dad about swim class? Lacey grinned and looked back at her fancy new accessory. I think that's the least I can do for you. CJ's excited glare fell upon the colorful, inky pages of his comic book with absolute adoration. The savage dragon's chest and face were sliced up pretty good after his fight with the Rat Man, but CJ saw it as a thing of beauty. Most of the Marvel and DC comics with their pretty art and childish superheroes didn't do it for him. CJ preferred Imagine Comics. They never skimmed the blood and broke all the boundaries. Although he was just short of being 12 years old, he had already acquired the taste for adult content. Thankfully, his parents saw comics as a childish distraction. They actually took the time to crack one open and saw the bloody chainsaws, boobs, and guts. They might be compelled to change their opinions. The hefty staff of comics that stepped on his bedside included many issues of The Savage Dragon, Spawn, The Max, a variety of old EC comics, reprints, and Kevin Eastman's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The comics were his window to elsewhere. They let him escape from the pressures that confronted him daily. And, without fail, he saw a future within them. A place and time of peace. His favorite activity was listening to his Walkman and losing himself in the illustrations and dark stories. The only problem was CJ wasn't the one who decided how he utilized his time. The play button popped up, momentarily interrupting the savage dragon's carnage. He extracted the cassette, Cypress Hill, Black Sunday, and flipped it to the other side. Before he could hit the play button and re-immerse himself in the bloodshed and stoner lyrics, his father's voice bled in from the open window. If you're going to reach your potential, then you've got to practice more than just a couple hours. That's 2 errors already. Now hustle back out there and don't give me any lip. CJ quietly clipped his headphones off and positioned himself at the window. He crept forward and peered around the corner. In the backyard, his little brother Kip was huffing and puffing. But how come CJ and Bobby don't have to be out here? Kip whined to their father. It's not fair. Yeah, well, I got news for you, kid. Life ain't fair. Greg windmilled the bat, stretching his wrist. Bobby ain't out here 'cause he's a dud, a shit athlete. No matter what he says, that stupid fucker skateboard is pointless. That's a hobby. That ain't no sport. CJ gets 3 hours to himself on weekends. Maybe you will too someday. If you can learn how to field a simple ground ball for Christ's sake. If you want to get what he gets, then you'll play as good as he does. It's that simple. Kip slapped his new baseball mitt against his leg in frustration and backed toward the fence. His father tapped the ball toward him at a decent pace, and Kip scooped up the one-hopper. Or I can just be a dud too, like Bobby, right? Kip asked. He tossed the ball back to his father's direction. CJ smiled momentarily, but his grin quickly faded. His kid brother was smart, but CJ understood the misery truth behind the question. He knew that whether or not Kip was as good as playing baseball as he was, Dad was still going to ride him hard either way. Kip wasn't going to be hanging out with friends, reading comic books, or thinking about girls. He would be confined to their modest backyard, fetching balls like a dog. And it wouldn't be because he wanted to, but because he had to, so Dad could feel a little closer to achieving the on-the-field success he never found for himself. Nice try, but I'm the one who has the eye for talent, Greg told Kip. He knocked Kip's gentle pitch back with far more power than the last and drilled the ball at his son to make a statement. Constantly asserting his dominance kept the boys under his thumb. You're only in debt if I say so, Craig continued. The line drive went right at Kip's face. He was just able to get his glove up and avoid getting beaned. But when the ball smacked the palm of his mitt, a sharp, stinging sensation ran up his arm. Ouch, Kip cried. A sour cringe from Greg. Come on, don't be a sissy. Did I tell you to take a break yet? Send it back. The visuals unfolding before CJ's eyes were all too familiar. The pros don't feel pain, Greg said. Now shake it off and send it back. 3 short knocks pulled CJ's attention away from the said display. CJ, Tony asked from behind the door. Yeah? Can I come in for a second? CJ walked over to the door and pulled it open. His sister stood in front of him, smiling excitedly. They usually didn't get much time together because of his full-time focus on baseball, a truth that saddened CJ. What's up? He asked. You almost ready? Mom said that we're going to get going now if we're going to make it to the playground on time. Oh crap, I completely forgot about that, CJ grinned. He'd been so lost in the tranquility of his music and comics that it slipped his mind. Relief fell over him. He wouldn't have dragged himself out back for another one of his dad's famous late afternoon practices. Said he might actually have some fun. He imagined the activities at the playground would be far more exciting than the endless repetitious drills he'd otherwise be forced into. Dang, his sister said. I don't know how you could forget about seeing those pictures, but today's the day, and remember, you promised me the seesaw. I'm scared for these seesaws. I'm scared for any of these attractions. But the fact that a child is excited, it hurts. It hurts. A laugh escaped him. He recalled the last few times they went. He'd vaulted her so high into the air that her butt flew several inches off the seat before smacking back down. Nope, none of that launch me in the air 5 feet stuff. You're gonna give me a heart attack. Tanya punched him in the arm softly, still maintaining her cheesy grin. CJ knew Tanya liked acting as if she hated it when he messed with her, but that wasn't the case. He wouldn't have done it to her if it truly bothered her. It was just one of those things she screamed and acted upset about, but secretly loved. Okay, I won't, he said, winking. Seriously, though, I'm looking forward to hanging out today. I'm so glad we get to do this. Me too. But I really hope they have a seesaw. I've never heard of an ultra-modern playground, haven't you? What's that even mean? I don't know. They gotta have one. What's a playground without... Suddenly their mother yelled from the bottom of the stairs. Tanya, I told you to get CJ and come downstairs. We need to go now. We're not supposed to be late. Tell Bobby to move his ass too. Tanya crinkled her face in annoyance and silently mimicked her mother's mini rant. A grin came up over CJ's face. For the first time in a while, he just knew it was going to be a good day. With all the fun they had lined up in front of him, how could it not be? Oh no, oh no. Okay, oh my god, it's about to get so gross. I know it. Oh my god. I don't want... It's bad. It's bad. It's so bad. Gentle giant. Rock Stanley stared at Gwendolyn Borden like she was a black hole, a gaping portal of darkness ready to devour him without a moment's notice. His eyes felt just as heavy as the weight that he carried on his stout shoulders. The terror encapsulates his pupils, which isn't anything new. The fear and uncertainty had been stapled to them long ago. The old hag's glare burrowed into him with the speed and ease of a laser beam. The discomfort that was transmitted left him fidgety. Rock reached up, removing his weathered flat cap, unsure how to respond. The simple question, Grenouille asked. How many were we supposed to have? Rock held the cap firmly in one hand and used his remaining sausage fingers to scratch the disheveled follicles on the top of his skull. The words still weren't coming. Answer me, you idiot. How many? Darlene's aged vocal cords screeched. 9. Rock finally managed to blurt out. Rock's uncertain tone didn't ooze intelligence, nor did his tremendous nature fit such an intimidating presence. At 6'3" and just under 280 pounds, he didn't have to take shit from anyone. Yet he did. Well, I'll be damned, Grenouille said. It speaks. Then help me understand, why did you approach a single parent and only one child yesterday? Furthermore, you waited until now, hours before they arrived, to tell me? You said I shouldn't bother you unless... Not another word. You'd never be worth a damn. Grenouille placed her hand over her mouth, adjusted her dentures, and anger left them on the verge of sliding out. This is why you'll never be a Borden. Why you'll never be worthy of my fortune. All I ever wanted was another deserving generation to continue once I'm gone. Is that really too much to ask? Rock's depression and angst only boiled harder than each cutting remark. He'd never been good enough. Not good enough for his blood parents, and certainly not good enough for his adopted mother. Geraldine was never shy about letting him know he hadn't earned acceptance. He was an outcast, an idiot, a habitual failure, an uncommon man in the sense that even while in presence of others, Rock Stanley was still alone. If my ovaries weren't barren, I would have had someone capable, Grenouille said. But instead I had to wait almost 2 years to get custody of a useless, sorry excuse like you. They didn't even give me a female. Even when you were just a child, I knew you'd be shit. I didn't get this successful, she swirled her finger around at the collection of valuables in the sunning room, by not having an eye for failure. I saw you, boy. I saw you coming unglued a mile away. I should have known better than to expect anything less. I should have known better than to believe I could somehow change you. She turned her back to Rock and looked up at the oil painting of herself that hung above the fireplace. It was a recent rendition that captured all her wrinkles and the oversized hazelnut mole on her left cheek. sprouting several inky hairs she'd neglected to trim. The vivid illustration outlined the compounded hatred and disgust harbored for decades, a lifetime of disappointment trapped in her eyes. While Geraldine's hair may have a blend of yin and yang, her soul was the former, black as night, and without that sinister space lay the fuel to propel against her corrupted mind could conjure. Anything her corrupted mind could conjure. I don't want to read. Like, I have to, but I don't want to. Outside the parlor, which was nearly the size of a high school gymnasium, the echo of footsteps approached, pausing at the doorway. Just beyond the threshold, in his elegant brown slacks, white collar shirt, and brunette, that's the male version, stood Adolphe Fuck. The curled brow above his left eye indicated a bit of concern. "What's all the fuss?" Fuck asked, his German roots shining through as he spoke. Geraldine squawked. "There's only going to be 8 now, thanks to this goddamn puzz." 9. Bitch, you forgetful. Rock's squared face and boxy jaw sank lower as he hung his head and clasped the edges of his flat cap with each of his bulky hands. His attire was a far cry from the aristocratic garments worn by Geraldine and Fuchs. I'm not gonna call him Fuchs. It's Fuchs. I'm gonna call him Fuchs. Fuchs? No. Fuchs. The lack of respectable clothing wasn't the result of financial limitations. Rock simply hadn't earned the right to high fashion the way Geraldine talked. He probably never would. Unless, of course, Rock was being unleashed to seek out candidates for the playground. In that case, Geraldine had a special outfit she allowed him to don. No family was going to trust a riffraff. "And, is 8 not enough?" Fox inquired. 9 is the number of children my mother had, Geraldine said. And her mother and I just... There was a quiver in her bottom lip, and she struggled to subdue. "I just wanted to know what it was like to be her for a day. Just a day." The German couldn't help but chuckle. Geraldine glowered. "What's so funny, Mr. Fuchs?" "Nothing, my lady," Fuchs replied, the amusement dissolving off his face. "When my mother fell ill, out of all my siblings, it was me that stayed by her side. When all the others left, I stayed. I deserved this." Even Fuchs had been around Geraldine for many decades now, wasn't so much shocked by her outlandish standards, but more by the rare display of emotion she offered them a window to. "I'm sorry. I wasn't aware," Fuchs replied. The emotion saturating her cadence quickly evaporated when she thought about what came next. "We've had several individual children come and play here in the past," she said. "The low number amounted to the safest approach, but as you both know, today is special. Today we take a risk. Today is about the family." The madness in Geraldine's eyes flared. It wasn't so much about family as it was about the family, the one she'd always wanted but was incapable of creating. It was about molding an extension of her own genetics into what she saw fit, about having an intimate connection with the mind she aspired to groom. Geraldine still had Rock, but as he'd grown, his company was nothing like she'd envisioned. She would never look down at the rest of the world with Rock. She could only look down on Rock, along with the rest of the world. If Geraldine had gotten the family she desired, there was a chance none of the day's events would even be necessary, that her corrupt mind wouldn't been accompanied elsewhere, and the vindictive philosophy at house might have never come to be. But that wasn't the case. These lowly peasants wallow in filth and poverty, and yet, ironically, they've created something even my wealth can't buy. The thing I wanted most. Something even a brilliant mind such as yours couldn't give me, Mr. Fox. Geraldine turned to Rock. These heathen parents have potential in their seeds. Generational potential. Their pathetic, utterly pointless legacies can be furthered by simply existing, by being graced with bodies that function properly. It's not the result of action. They didn't earn anything. They didn't do anything. It's dumb luck. That luck runs out today. That unwarranted opportunity shall come to an end. "That it will," Fox said. The German brandished a warped smile that conveyed he was every bit as sick and in line with the ideas Geraldine put forth. Geraldine put her eyes on Fox once again. She mirrored his grin until another thought warmed into her brain and stunted. "That is, if the numbskull can be effective for 1 day," she said. "Probably too much to ask, though." Geraldine fixed her glare back on Rock. He hung his head down, and Rock tried to imagine he wasn't there. As beautiful as the boarding estate was, to him it was a prison. Built of gold, none of the castle's luxury could make it worth his stay. Rock lived inside an echo chamber. The rage-laced rants Geraldine regurgitated with cunning consistency ensured there would always be a resounding reminders of his inferiority. The points were always punctual, so he could never forget. Poor Rock. He was a failure. He was a lesser human. He would never be good enough. It was not just Geraldine saw Rock, but also how Rock saw himself. "The boy will never be perfect," Fuchs said. "But he has secured you 8. We must be grateful for those efforts. Otherwise, we risk ruining the festivities. You mustn't let one bad apple spoil the bunch, my lady. You should still have some joy for today. Will be far different than any other that we've ever witnessed." Geraldine glared at the old man and let the words Fuchs offered simmer in her brain. A smile crept over her haggard face. "Maybe you're right. It's not perfect, but I suppose we'll just have to make the best of it." She turned herself back to Rock's direction. "Go to my room. It's time we dress you properly for our guests arrive." Fun as far as the eye can see. So far we have 5 kids. We have the 4 that, CJ, Bobby, Kip, and Tanya. And we have Donnie. Fun as far as the eye can see. "Settle down," Tom demanded, using his best disciplinary voice. "I know you're excited, but unless the 2 of you relax, we'll turn this car right around. I'm serious. No more screaming in this. Is that clear?" "Yeesh, chill out, Dad," Sadie replied. "Yeah, we're just playing," Samantha said. Sadie leaned into her and let out a girlish giggle. Isaac pushed his bulky glasses up his nose and sat staring out the window. You peered over the edge of the cliff. All right, so now we're at 8. You peered over the edge of the cliff, watching the stunning waves hypnotically flow. Even the road leading to their wondrous destination was fancy. Something incredible was approaching, and he wasn't about to let his sisters fuck that up for him. He usually preferred to keep to himself. This is what I get for doing this early in the morning. And by early, I mean at 8 a.m. He usually preferred to keep to himself. At 10 years old, Isaac still had much to learn and was fully aware of that. Before his age, he was far ahead of the majority of his peers. He wasn't egotistical about it, quite the contrary. However, as he often did, Isaac used sound reasoning to plead his case to his father. "How is it fair to punish all of us because Sam and Sadie want to be brats?" "Hey," Sadie yipped. While Tom kept his focus on the road, Molly took the initiative. She craned her neck around to Isaac to let out a sigh. "I suppose if that happened, we'd just have to do something extra special for you in the future," Molly said, bouncing her eyebrows. "We'll be good," Sam begged. "Yeah," Sadie chimed in. "After seeing the pictures that you showed us, this place, there's no way you could one-up it. I'd still be losing out." "Sounds like your sisters are going to behave." "Right," wink, wink, Tom interjected, glaring at Sadie and Sam in the rear view. They noticed at the stare of chastisement and nodded at him accordingly. You shouldn't have anything to worry about, buddy," Tom assured him. "Besides, I think it's just up ahead." Tall ebony gates pointed toward the slow-drifting cluster of clouds floating above. The towering steel spears seemed higher than necessary. I'm so like, I know something horrible's coming. Not the gore. Fuck, I welcome the gore. But it's gross. And it's so descriptive. Like, how many ways can you describe the same gross thing in new, creative, and worse ways? The medieval architecture ripped from the children's fable. The placement of the estate at the end of the sequestered cliff walk created another inordinate coating of privacy along with the location. The sheer altitude of the massive stone walls layered in front of the steel fencing could have kept a colossus at bay. The girls screeched in unison, "We're here! We're here!" Isaac crinkled his face in annoyance. His sisters knew how to squeak out pitches that always got under his skin. They knew it did. That's exactly why they did it. While Sam was a year older than Sadie, most people believed them to be twins. It wasn't the case, but it spoke to their kinship and bond. Their personalities were in stark contrast to their older brothers. Sadie in particular. Ooh, we got another little drawing. On the road again. She might have only been 7 years old, but she didn't let that stop her from scoring squaring off with Isaac. She'd been known to assault him, both verbally and physically. She was a firecracker, and once her fuse was lit, Isaac knew he was in for a battle. Sam was no angel either, but never seemed to initiate the torment. Despite being born first, she followed Sadie's lead. If Sadie was mean, Sam was mean. The mimic of brazen behavior was most likely the reason people believed them to be twins. Also, they both had a similar dainty stature and were blessed with the same shimmering blonde hair. That shimmering blonde hair is about to be matted with blood. Oh, you want to dye your hair? Let's try fucking Fire Engine Red. Imagining what's coming. Okay. Sam's hair was normally held back in ponytail while Sadie's had pigtails. Most people who encountered the sisters for the first time perceived them as innocent, but looks could be deceiving, and often were. Yeah, like this place. How the hell does this work? Tom asked. Good question, Molly replied, scanning the brochure. These gates are so huge, Isaac mumbled. Your ears are huge, Sadie snipped. She reached around Sam and flicked the wide, awkward cartilage that leaped off the side of her brother's face. Her harassment was stealthy enough to avoid gathering parental attention. A slight rush of blush manifested on Isaac's cheeks. His sister knew how to hurt him. My ears are big. Me. It wasn't enough that he's scrawny and unathletic or that he was shy as a chipmunk. He already got fucked with in school for having strange ears, but Sadie wanted to turn the screw even further. She wasn't the type to avoid people's sensitivities. She preferred to exploit them, to publicly tar and feather them. It wasn't just Isaac. She'd done it to her peers, strangers and friends. At just 7 years old, Sadie's name rang closer to her personality. She was a psychological sadist. As the family wagon crept to a stop, Tom rolled down. Okay, so from what I understand about this book, the spoilers that Disney Princess gave me, is that Geraldine, obviously, we kind of know this already, that she wants a prodigy. She wants to bring in someone who can take over. Now, the boys, she doesn't want a boy. She wants a female. And already we've seen from Sadie and Tanya that they do have that cunning, I'm going to do what I got to do to get what I want. So I'm wondering which of them it will be that she latches on to. I just know that one of the kids ends up sucking up to her and, is, an equal in some way to her. And I'm willing to bet it's going to be one of the girls. Because I don't think any of the boys have it in them to do that. So far from what, we've seen. Donnie, he seems on, too similar of a level of, Rock, where he's just kind of, just taking it. Although I would like to see his little revenge arc, but I don't want him working for, the abuser. And then CJ and Kip, I feel like they're too much, I feel like once their dad's influence isn't there, they're gonna be, quicker to, crack under pressure. And then Bobby, I think he's, his, from years of being told, you're not good enough, similar to Donnie, I don't think he's gonna make it very long. And then Sam and Isaac, I don't know. Because Sam just follows Sadie. I think Sadie's gonna end up pushing it to a level where Sam will not be able to follow. And then Isaac, similarly, will not be able to follow because he's just very self-deprecating. But I can see him lasting a while because he is very intelligent. I feel like he's not going to be the first death. I almost want to do a dead meat thing where they're oh my god, here's the golden chainsaw for the coolest kill. Dull machete for lamest kill goes to. And then I feel within this one, with Saw, they did this is the what was it, the bungee stick or something like that. It was oh, this is the best trap. And then this is the rusty mouse trap for the worst trap. I feel I'm gonna do that accidentally. And by accident I mean I like dead meat. Bam, I'm gonna do my version. So we're gonna do the, I guess golden chainsaw and dull machete would work. And then in terms of the trappy traps, I feel theme park is the height of oh my god, because it's built to stay there and endure. And then the opposite I guess would be Oh my god, you know those little things that, like, babies, like, they sit on? Like, and they hold it, and then they spin themselves around, and it's, like, so fucking small, and, like, that's gonna be the doll, like, this one's stupid. The window of the driver's side door, he gawked at the small speaker with the single white button staring back at him. I guess I'll just push the button, Tom shrugged. Molly nodded him in approval. The crackle of the speaker suddenly erupted with an elderly man's German accent. Hello, name please. Ah, it's Tom Grimley. Wonderful. The gates ahead are opening now. Follow the path all the way to the main entrance, and we shall be with you very shortly. All right, sounds good. A loud metallic unlocking sound rang, followed by the electronic hum of the gate sliding backwards. The Grimley family sat wide-eyed as Tom pushed down on the accelerator. So here's the trigger warnings that I mentioned earlier. Impromptu encouragement. Rock stared into the mirror, the collective pain pooling in his glazed eyes. Geraldine lurked creepily behind him and slapped the raggedy coat off his torso. Her hands lingered longer than necessary on his muscular frame, familiar with his physique. She caressed Rock as she disrobed him. Oof, my word, Geraldine said. When's the last time you bathed? You're most certainly going to need to take a shower. I can't have you smelling so foul in front of our guest. Even if you're not above them, you need to act like it. Get this undershirt off. Rock hesitated. An unavoidable, rotten reminder was looming, when he wasn't ready to confront again. It was the reason his funk had become so swollen that it leaked into his battered garments. Geraldine scrunched her face. Take it off, I said. The cutting command caused Rock to jump. Geraldine's hands remained resting on the back of his arms. She quivered as the warmth spread through her arms. Feeling the physical manifestation of his fear contact her flames excited Geraldine. It enticed her. Rock pulled the white undershirt over his muscular frame and dropped them on the floor. Geraldine peered around the wall of the man in front of her, gazing into the standing mirror, feeding on the agony bounced back from Rock's pupils. The melodic muscle man eyed the reflective glass, still unable to believe it was real. He was past the present and future in a single glimpse. Suddenly his senses were overwhelmed, and a visceral flash of the encounter crept back into his head. The scent of cooked flesh found his nasal cavity again, the sound of searing skin crackling its way into his eardrums. He felt searing skin crackle, itchy rope binding his wrist, and the wriggles of the wooden chair he was tied to. The soreness in his throat flared from desperate screams relentlessly ravaging it. Rock's eyes dropped as they took in the reddish-violet skin that bubbled back towards him. The eternally inflamed tissue puffed upwards, discolored by the unforgiving heat of the branding iron Geraldine had held all those years ago. At that time, Rock was just a throwaway, an unwanted and undeveloped teenager. She'd been harsh and wicked to him, but he'd never expected things to escalate in the manner that they had. He never imagined such an irreversible event would transpire, though that old, adolescent lens, Geraldine, looked a bit different in his mind. Her skin was smoother and her hair had more color, but her tongue was still as sharp as ever. It remained her most punishing tool, one that haunted Rock as he steadily as Geraldine's hand the moment she pressed the scalding iron into his chest. Over and over and over. Rock recalled how Geraldine had screamed while this flesh had flared from the blistering heat. Why'd you look at her? She said. I saw you. Just a short distance away from where he'd sat, Wanda, the then live-in maid, lay motionless on the floor. A growing outline of garment gruesomeness that had infected the carpet, the soaked flooring her cracked head lay upon with the sight of Wanda's final thoughts. The battered brain tissue littered around her malformed head was a ghastly image that had burned itself into Rock. It was the picture of all potential fear, the violet amalgamation of inner cranial tissue, skeletal fragments, and Geraldine's rage. An incident that has left an impression of such depth on him that would last a lifetime. Rock remembered the nonchalant nature of the only other living adult in the room. The straight-faced Fox wore as he watched the madness unfold, sitting casually on the sofa by the fireplace. The gory murder was far from the most difficult thing Fox had seen. It looked like just another evening for him as he puffed away at his pipe, watching the branding iron in the fire grow a lighter shade of ginger. "You better take a damn good look at her now," Geraldine bellowed, "'cause the last time you'll ever fucking see her. It's the last time you'll ever see anyone." Geraldine's grim words weren't exactly accurate. Rock would see her again, for he would be tasked with turning Wanda's body into fertilizer. Her carcass was hefty. The generous proportions of garbled-up tissue allowed the insects to eat well that evening. After the deed was done, Rock peered over that land, trying to lose himself in the soothing sound of the ocean waves in his heart. He hoped the garden's insects would never eat so well again. It wouldn't be the last time Rock heard the hungry hum of the industrial-grade wood chipper. More meat would be tenderized, and more bones would be mangled. The device continued to gain relevance as his twisted relationship with Renaldine unraveled. Wanda's departure left a void in the housework, but no replacement was hired. Geraldine's jealousy kept new personalities from entering the fold. Instead, she forced Rock to absorb all of Wanda's duties in addition to the ones he already managed. Geraldine's delusional belief that there was a sexual interest between Rock and the help would never be corrected. His punishment remained permanently in effect, and those living within the walls of the Borden estate continued their push to total societal isolation. Rock trembled with disgust, breaking out his dreamlike stay as Geraldine pruned paws glided upwards over the unaltered letters scorched into his skin. "You're mine, remember?" she whispered seductively. The discolored letters weren't perfectly aligned, but they were close enough to be understood. The four-letter word that had been singed into Rock's soul. As Rock stared into the mirror and read the ghastly font that comprised the word mine, a single tear fell from his bristly cheek. "And you'll be mine forever," Geraldine said. She laid down on the bed, climbed behind them, and delicately tugged Rock's hands. The conservative dress Geraldine wore became the opposite when she arched her rickety back and pulled the ox-toned serotonal up over her hips. I'm gonna take a drink. Let's just... As Geraldine stared at the solemn expression and the permanent label she had administered beneath it, she only grew more eager to feel his tongue inside her. She pulled her moist panties down, allowing her fermented beaver to peek out from below. The scent was just as ungodly as the sight. Rock stared at the stretchy skin abound with wrinkles, the slick and sudsy sap leaking out from her floppy hole. Glistening in the daylight, when Geraldine got juicy, she manufactured a rancid odor, all her own, one that made Rock sick to his stomach each time he encountered it. The fetid aroma fluttered around, triggering a flashback to the many awful pastimes Rock had been forced into. The sourish scent stunk of outdated dairy, spoiled seafood, and asparagus-tainted urine. The monstrous melody that was Geraldine's cave brought Rock to his knees. As Rock looked at the moldy meat, he heard Geraldine's raving in his head. "The chemicals in those soaps and shampoos shorten the average lifespan. That's why I'll need to stay clean, and why I need to maintain my natural oils." Rock had watched Geraldine grow conspiratorial in her old age. It was like she sensed doom looming over her bottomless wealth could never expend her life so far. "What are you waiting for?" Geraldine asked. She pulled her legs upward, exposing her cunt and asshole. The playful passion in her voice was starting to dry up. Impatience. Anger could return at any moment. At the sickening crack of her hip popping resounded through Rock's skull, he knew it was best to begin. A woman of Geraldine's age shouldn't have been so flexible, but she put Rock up to the task with the regularity that the yoga-like stretch had become an amateur task. He'd heard her bone clear as a church bell. It rang most times just before he was presented with his most appalling chore. With an inner disturbance beating around his bowels, he wished it was over. But wishes weren't for people like him. They were for those who celebrated birthdays and those who aspired to accomplish great things in their lifetimes. They were for normal people that hadn't disappointed everyone they'd come into contact with. Rock unhinged his jaws and tried to accumulate saliva. Anxiety had dried his mouth to dust. He stared at the faded meat littered with spiky gray hair. There were patches of scratchy old skin infected with flaking dead cells, not to mention a mortifying rash-like irritation that encompassed her entire cunt. There were also other areas afflicted with random discoloration, flesh dominated by something that looked fungal in origin. Geraldine harbored countless battle scars from the experimentations Fox had put her through. The molecules of other men had left her altered. She made many sacrifices en route to achieving an impossible dream. "Do it," she barked. As Adrenaline waited for Rock to dive in, she glared deeply into her reflection in the standing mirror. Rock finally consented. That's not the word. Sticking his boxy face between her feminine snake bite as his tongue registered her tart taint. He did his best not to vomit. He couldn't prevent it totally, but the minuscule acidic wave that crept up his esophagus proved useful. He swashed it around his palate, allowing his dry mouth a measure of relief before he went full bore, eating her clit. It was a trick he learned some time ago, using his own revulsion to his benefit. As Rock nibbled into the rosy micropenis, he swallowed the clear vomit to dribble over her pussy and down her ass crack. "Oh yes," Geraldine roared. Her cries signified how alive she felt. She arched her head back and used her free hand to latch onto the hairs growing from her mole. She twisted the elongated follicles with each lap Rock took, then refocused her gaze on her warm reflection. She became lost in herself as she wailed out and tugged the sharp mole hairs, taking joy in the subtle stinging pain. Rock accelerated using the technique he'd gained from their prior encounters. He tried his damnedest to make her come as quickly as possible. He didn't want to make eating her ass and cunt any longer than the bare minimum. He kicked into a higher gear, accelerating his pursuasive actions, doing his best to remember what made her moist. Rock's jaw began to ache alongside his heart. He used his fattest finger to gather spit and puke, then gently massaged the skin between each of her holes. "Fuck," she cried. "Don't stop, don't you fucking..." Geraldine's sense was cut off by her own lust-laced excitement. Her eyes widened in capacity as ecstasy overwhelmed her, and her ghastly head whipped side to side with such jubilation that it caused her bottom dentures to eject from her mouth. A hairy wad of drool leaked from her gummy mouth in the heat of passion. Geraldine didn't let the slip spoil her moment. She cradled Rock's face with her thighs and pulled it deeper into her parts. Then she dug her pointy nails into the back of his head and came like a hurricane. House of the Blind. Geraldine lay alone on her silky gold sheets, the ecstasy slithering through her wrinkled system a fleeting one. Upon being penetrated with a smarting sting of boredom again, she crawled her way out of bed. She hadn't bothered to put her teeth back in or wipe her slimy vaginal leakage dry. She was too focused on the door at the far end of her bedroom. Her cunt dribbled onto the hardwoods as she closed in on the knob. She found her enthusiasm again. As Geraldine twisted her wet, liver-spotted hand and pulled the door open, a different world presented itself. One that often preoccupied her wicked mind, a place that no one else but her could possibly understand. The reflective surfaces stretched from the floors to the walls to the ceiling. Not an inch was left uncovered. Light fixtures dangled from the reflective ceiling in the narrow, wrapped maze of mirrors. Parts of it felt like a fun house, the architecture of a room having so many numerous paths that crossed over each other. But the images of the room projected didn't stretch each other, but the images... Geraldine's physique in childish or exaggerated manners, she designed the area so she could gaze upon the most granular, ornate details of the body she was obsessed with. The only vessel that could propel her heart to race and bring back the legendary memories. Geraldine was the oyster of her own eye. Having a prematurely unsatisfied sex drive took work, but however unorthodox the measure, she aimed to quench her thirst. Geraldine knew she'd never be able to have herself the way she craved, but she'd done everything to make the experience as close to her unusual fantasies as possible. The shiny hallways looked like the exterior of a diseased cactus. The countless multicolored pricks of pleasure extended outward, calling to her. Some were long, some were wide, some were soft, some were hard. The dildos were suctioned to the glass mirrors within the hallways. She could slow her haggard frame in front of whichever one struck her fancy and adjust it to the appropriate height and angle. She turned her back to the wall and looked at her slender, worn reflection. "Just the girl I was looking for," she said with a smirk. The orange rubber cock litter with stout veins and nightcrawler-sized dimensions immediately made her lips pucker. A crusted hormonal residue still hung in gunky flakes on the pumpkin-toned shaft from one of her previous sessions. She was ready to reintroduce the dry remains into her soggy cavern. "Thanks, Disney princess. Thanks." The dildo drew closer to her slobbering slit, and Geraldine's stretchy parts quivered with hunger. Her pruned gash was ready. Just being inside the room of her ultimate obsession made her heart pump, and the feeling of the rod reconnecting with her hole, left her knees weak. In the room, she was blind to the typical surroundings that saddened her, the dark reality that she was doomed to remain alone within the hall of mirrors. She was able to lose herself in her autonomy, and also immerse herself enough to reminiscence about the origins of those feelings. The sound of her moist meat conforming and stretching to accommodate the object filled her eardrums. Geraldine firmed her body and pressed her lined palms against the glass in front of her. She rode the rubber like an eager porn star, as saliva seeped from her mouth. She looked at her own leathery leer, relishing in her reflection. It still wasn't enough. Geraldine closed her eyes. She traveled back to time when there was still hope, when the outlook wasn't so dreary, when she was focused on finding satisfaction and not robbing others of it. The intense images played like a secret movie in her skull. 7-year-old Geraldine sat in the closet. The slivers of the blinds in front of her nose offered an obscure but satisfactory view. She spied her mother's smooth, bare ass on the bed. It was the first time she'd gotten to see it, but far from the first time she thought about it. She had no idea when the feelings had come from, but as far back as she could remember, Mildred Bourne's backside was a daily thought. It became an obsession. Seeing her mother's ass sitting atop another man's face stirred a strange, warm, yet welcome feeling inside Geraldine, but along with the elation came anger. Geraldine wasn't upset her mother wasn't riding her father's face. She was upset she wasn't riding hers. I don't love this part. Geraldine really got an opportunity to play wrestle with her mom, but whenever she did, she always let her mother get on top. Each time she tried to worm way closer to her hips, closer to having that thick, voluptuous backside suffocating her. Geraldine's mother always realized the awkwardness when it arose. Like any logical parent, Mildred pulled away from the inappropriate positions. She wasn't quite sure if her daughter was aware of the inappropriateness of such horseplay, but as time went on, the sparkle of suspicion in Mildred's eyes only widened. Now, as Geraldine thought about her mother, she fiercely gnashed her purple, slimy gums. Her racing heart told her she'd found the closest thing to love she could manufacture. Memories from the closet in her mind, the more important moments in Geraldine's deranged timeline triggered. As a teenager, she happened upon the panties in the trash. They were there for the taking, bonded to the pad by a patch of congealed blood. Mildred's flow had gotten a little too heavy. Geraldine had stared down at them, biting her bottom lip. The red cloth had been so close to her mother's beautiful ass, as close as she wanted to be. Geraldine couldn't just let them go to waste, so she plucked the Nashley underwear from the can, lifted them to her face, burying her nose inside. The irony, filet-o-fish scent, made Geraldine quiver with exhilaration. She was so enthralled after her sniff that she forgot to clean the blood away from her face. After the groundbreaking day, Mildred always believed Geraldine got random bloody noses because of the spontaneous excuse she had to give. While the penetration deep inside Geraldine's pussy continued, she continued to reminisce. She took a slobber of drool and slapped it between her legs. With the saliva on her, she rubbed it, attempting to escalate her erotic trip down memory lane. I miss you, Mama, she hissed, her tone bordering on demonic. The obscene imagery in her head transformed from the trash to the toilet. In her mind, she stood inside the spacious bathroom connected directly to her mother's bedroom, in a mansion as grand as Geraldine's childhood home. The luxury alone would have been enough to distract most, but bottomless money and elegant accommodation had done little to entertain her. Snooping through her mother's belongings, however. On that particular twisted morning, Mildred had left in a hurry. There had been some kind of emergency. While Geraldine couldn't remember exactly what the commotion was, it was of little relevance. The floating mass that lay in the mustardy water in front of Geraldine was all she needed to remember. Her mother had left in such a flash she'd forgotten to flush. The law of excrement wasn't particularly large. It appeared that her mother had been interrupted and unable to finish her business. Geraldine's eyes had been glued to the modest movement drifting in the tainted liquid. It beckoned her. Even though it was shit, it had slid out between the two heavenly hams that made up Mom's posterior. It couldn't be overlooked. At the time, it might have been the closest Geraldine would ever get to tasting her infatuation. So she plucked the protrude purge from the bowl and laid her body down on the floor. As Geraldine slipped out off her pants and underwear, she stared at the lurid lump with an irresistible inner lust. Geraldine had only nibbed on it in the beginning, cherishing each experimental gnaw, along with the pungent stench that clung to it. But her enthusiasm rapidly escalated. Geraldine's hot lady part shuddered at her perverse inner spirit, took a crushing hold over her. Her teeth soon parted, and she inserted the soggy mass into her mouth, all but for half an inch on the tail end. Imagining her mother perched over her face, Geraldine chewed into the slimy secretion. She visualized that it might taste the same as her mother, if only Geraldine had been able to pounce on her unwashed backside that morning. Geraldine hadn't swallowed it. She'd savored it. She had taken the remaining wad of waste between her fingers and positioned it upon her pleading clit, smearing the shit in a circular fashion. She'd never come so hard as the day she'd happened upon the bowel movement. Not until the last time she saw her mother. The gush of liquid that had left Geraldine that morning on the Spanish-tiled floor of her mother's bathroom pulled her closer to a current climax. She held her eyes shut, relieving the rancid memory down to the finest detail, knowing the best was yet to come. The twisted slideshow moved forward in Geraldine's mind. A mid-40s version of Geraldine stood over her sick mother's bedside. For such a grim situation, the wide grin frozen on Geraldine's face certainly seemed out of place. The oxygen mask fixed upon Mildred's mouth spelled doom. She was scrawny and hardly able to move. Speaking was no longer an option in her bedridden state. It looked like death was looming over her, and in a way he was. But the vehicle he had assumed to collect the aristocrat was one Mildred would have never predicted. When Geraldine's pants and panties had come off, so had Mildred's oxygen mask. She struggled to breathe without the assistance of the device, but her fight had become far more extreme when Geraldine plopped down on top of her face with her sagging snatch. Emulating her mother's actions from years past, Geraldine muscled her malicious meat over Mildred's mouth and nostrils. An oily trail of clear and off-white fluids blanketed Mildred's horrified face, as Geraldine's legs quaked with pleasure she'd never imagined. The sniffles and gasps her mother emitted vibrated round against her lips and hood. Mildred, perverse, struggled, continued to tickle Geraldine until a newfound elation championed her to pinnacle before finally dying out together. The flashback of her mother sucking at her clit for dear life always brought Geraldine to the promised land as she smashed her ass vigorously against the mirror, Her arousal peaked. The scream of pleasure that roared from her throat was accompanied by an explosion of creamy leakage. The force of her thrust rattled the mirror, but she wasn't worried about the breaking. When the Hall of Mirrors was constructed, she used extra thick panes. It wouldn't take a tremendous amount of force for these to buckle. She grinned with glee as she ramped up her revulsions, thrashing wildly against the wall like a woman who'd been caged for years. The vision didn't fixate upon any particular detail. Geraldine consumed the scene as a whole, and as she slithered closer to climax, she opened her eyes and gawked at the woman in the glass. She wasn't sure if her mother's murder was the reason she'd become attracted to her own physique, but it seemed like the only logical, yes, that is a word I would associate in this. The two of them looked so much alike. During her 20s, Geraldine and Mildred had often been mistaken for sisters, but just as Geraldine slid her hand off the stiff plastic, another recollection wormed its way into her brain. One she'd rather not ponder, but always seemed to be confronted by. Geraldine had no one left to chase. She looked into the mirror, wiping the drool from her mouth, a wrinkle of disgust overtaking her expression. About damn time, disgust prickles in. The shift in her psychosexual philosophy was a difficult one. Geraldine's self-lust was enjoyable at first, but it wasn't the same as the other mountains she'd climbed. The summary of sensation wasn't even a blip on the erotic radar compared to the incestual instances with her mother. It was like going from caviar to catfish. Sure, her fatal flaw was obvious. She hadn't thought ahead. Even when the solution came to her, it was too late. She remembered the thought quite vividly, but it was a concept she'd rather have forgotten. As far back as Geraldine could remember, she'd always hated people. But a short time after Mildred's funeral, when she'd been depressed as ever, she decided she couldn't be alone. She hadn't been seeking to communicate with anyone, but just to quell her lonesomeness. The playground was a random choice, a place her mother had taken her before their wealth had ballooned. A place Geraldine remembered dallying around with a nostalgic fondness. That day, when Geraldine took her place in the park bench, she saw a mother and daughter playing together. She couldn't help but release how similar they looked. It was nearly the same level of replication that Geraldine had seen between her and Mildred. Then suddenly it struck her. A child, she thought. Shoot me and then her. Or her then me. Her playground epiphany had the potential to replace the darkness she yearned for. In theory, it made sense, but an unnoticed truth confronted her. Geraldine had over-ripened. During the decades of blindness where her incestuous craze had all but consumed her, Geraldine's reproductive pieces had grown stagnant. She slowly dried away into irreversible infertility. It was as if God knew the infernal escapades that might ensue and had given his stamp of approval. Geraldine stared at herself in the mirror and reflected on the past, and thinking about what brought her to this moment, her expression had a measure of anger. But beyond the hatred, she was making room for another emotion. Her pupils flared a twinkle of joy, eclipsing the rotten recollections. You're something else, you got that right. Since finding her out children weren't in her future, Geraldine had returned to the playground countless times. Ideas of how to best place her demons had programmed as head. How she perceived the more fortunate families playing in the space. Geraldine's gummy grin now stared back at her in the mirror. What had been as a simple idea was finally ready to be revealed. The structure the peasants deserved would finally be given to them, structures only in an era of vindictiveness could have conjured. The charity she'd built, the millions of dollars that she'd spent, the countless test runs she'd orchestrated, the precious years that had been passed by her, that had all been building towards this moment, the impending climax of a wretched lifetime. The privileged peasants would soon understand what peril truly was. She would bring balance back to the world around her and show them all she'd been robbed of. Exiting the Hall of Mirrors, Geraldine looked at the grandfather clock near the fireplace. I'd better hurry. So that's the first 50 pages. Are we feeling scared yet? Maybe I'll come back. 50 pages done. Yippee-ki-yay, you know? I hated every part of that. That was not
Oh. Alright, well. I hope we had fun. I didn't. I'm having already read that, like, I already got most of, like, my outlandish reactions out in a party of people, because that's where I read it. I read it at a party. And they got my reactions, particularly Disney Princess, who had already read those parts. So I was like, yep, I know, it's fucked up, isn't it? And I'm like, yep, that's pretty fucking fucked up, man. They did warn me, too. Like, she was all like, hey, man, guess what's fucked up? And I was like, oh, well, yeah, everyone's talking about how fucking scary it is. I'll have to look up and see what page it was. Everyone was like, oh my god, I couldn't get past that scene. I'm pretty sure it's the shit eating that they're like, I couldn't get past it. Which is fair. Know your boundaries. I came here for gore. And it's proving just how funny it would be if I started reading smut. Because I'm ace. So, like, sex does not interest me at all. So, any iteration of it, I kind of, like, judge it. Now, I'd be lying if I said some, like, scenes of, like, sexual content didn't, like, make me go, ooh, blushy, blushy. But that's more so, like, how they're speaking to each other. Oh, they're, like, checking and making sure everyone's comfortable. Oh, like, he probably has a nice collarbone. That's, like, the extent. Yep, that's something. Alright. Well, I'll be back. My plan is I'm gonna pack up the 3 books that I'm kind of reading within this, like Vicious, Mortal Engines, and then Playground now too. I'm gonna pack them up with me to go to college for my first week, and I assume that within my first week, hi Tucker, as I, try to have my room be my home, I'll just plop down and do some reading. Yeah, that feels like a great idea. A great way to introduce life to college. But anyway, yeah. I hope you enjoyed. Be the person you need in the world. Goodbye. Go do some aftercare. I'm gonna go do some aftercare. I might watch an episode of Bluey after that. Go do some aftercare. Watch Bluey. Fucking hell. Bye.